Is the age of social media monopolies over? Long-term viewers of my YouTube channel will know that I've made a good few videos at various points in time about social media monopolies. Probably one of the key ones was that back in... Let's talk about when was this? 2021, late 2021. I made a video called The Metaverse, a Guide to the Future of Capitalism. And the whole thing was kind of about the platformization of our economy. And one of the kind of more popular kind of restatements of this argument more recently has been Yanis Varoufakis's Techno-Feudalism, which some of you might have read. It borrows some ideas, I would say, from a book called Capital is Dead, Is There Something Worse? By Mackenzie Walk, which came out in 2019. Both of which argue that capitalism in some way has transformed into something slightly different, right? Yanis likes to use the word techno-feudalism, cloud capital, some of which I think is interesting and provocative, even if I don't necessarily always think the language is super helpful, but that's a personal take. Mackenzie Walk uses, I can't remember exactly what the phraseology she uses, but she talks about like everyone either being a sort of hacker or a something else. Oh, okay, no, brilliant. He does acknowledge that there is because actually this I don't know, this book and this book, having read Capital is Dead, when I read Techno-Feudalism, I was like, this feels very similar. One of the kind of key parts of the arguments in both of these books, and the argument I make in much of this video, there is a brilliant book called Platform Capitalism by Nick Cernick, which is still the phrase that I would use to kind of describe this transformation of capitalism. I think shifting to language of techno-feudalism, I think, is to give too much due to the legitimizing logic of capitalism, and to pretend that the legitimizing logic is also how capitalism actually has ever existed, which I don't think it is. I think all the stuff around monopoly and rent seeking, etc., I think has always been there, and therefore giving it a new phrase, anyway, that's by the by. A key part of the arguments of those books, that video, of this kind of entire field, is that there is a degree to which most technological stuff these days, because it is so built on networks, and because networks tend to work better when there are more nodes in that network, whether that's computers being connected to one another, whether that's files being shareable, whether that is people having accounts on social media networks, that all of these things tend towards monopoly. So when we talk about this in relation to social media, an idea which often comes up is the idea of natural monopolies. Maybe I can find something around this from this video. This is the idea that social media platforms work better when there is more people on them. Okay, so I might only sign up for Facebook, as I'm sure I did in 2000 and something, because some of my friends are on it. And the more of my friends that are on Facebook, the more likely I am to sign up to Facebook specifically. And if at the same time all of my friends were using Bebo and now they're leaving Bebo, I'd probably stop using Bebo, because the function of the site is for me to talk with and share stuff with my friends, and therefore if they're not there, it kind of doesn't work. And gradually, if Facebook becomes the place, then more and more people flock to Facebook because that's where their family is, that's where their friends are. And it becomes really hard to leave that platform as well, because you might like the look of Twitter, for example, because you might be the kind of person that likes to engage in the news or arguing with strangers or whatever. But what tends to happen is that something like Twitter can never really compete with Facebook because just it has that, someone's just said, it's like gravity, right? There's just that whole thing that once you've got enough people, that becomes the default place to be. And I was reading another book in which this comes up today called End State by James Plunkett, which I'm not very far through. So far has some reasonably interesting ideas in it. And one of the... And as I was listening to this book, Plunkett, or at least it was an audiobook, so at least the chap who reads the audiobook was talking about this idea about, something like Facebook has become a monopoly. It's become impossible to avoid it being a monopoly. Everyone's glued to it. And I was thinking back to when, I guess I was probably... I would have been writing this just after this book came out, I guess, a couple of months afterwards. I hadn't read the book at that time, and at that time, I think it felt like maybe that was the case. And there is still an extent to which Facebook has a huge user base, particularly for like normal people. I think, unfortunately, if you are someone that is watching this, particularly on Twitch, but even if you are someone that is watching this on YouTube later on, certainly if you're someone that is in the chat, and certainly if you are a YouTube commenter, those are things which I'm afraid mark you out as not being normal in a technological sense. By which I don't mean normal in a kind of like being cool or whatever. I just mean normal in the sense of using the internet like the vast majority of people do. Most people never comment on YouTube videos. Most people, like, Twitch is an incredibly niche platform which most people, if they have heard of, have not visited. Love you all dearly. Most normal people don't use Twitter, right? They don't use X. Normal people love Facebook Marketplace, Facebook groups. Like, there is still a huge amount of people who use Facebook in this way. However, the fact that there is a kind of vision of who is a Facebook person now, and how that separates them from you as Twitch people, me as a Twitch person, I guess, you as YouTube people, even from Instagram people, big overlap, right, between Facebook people and Instagram people. Maybe Facebook's a bit older now. Instagram still has a little bit of youth to it, even if both are a bit normie. Twitter has always been weird. I've always been a kind of a sort of Twitter person, right? I'm someone who pays attention to the news and likes and wants to hear what all the journalists are saying first. I'm also someone who has inflated ideas of whether my own opinions matter, I guess, and therefore I'm someone who feels like, yes, I should also be able to respond to this by putting something out there as well, and people will flock to it. What's been interesting is the way in which that has become... A few years ago, Facebook was the central gravity for all of this stuff, for social media. Everything else was a little bit odd. Gradually, however, Facebook has itself become a little bit odd. And I think what we've seen is that social media platforms have become sometimes polarized in some ways, if you go to Twitter, now X, it is effectively like being in a right-wing group chat. Probably slightly less than Trump Social, or oh goodness, I can't even remember any of the like various kind of Twitter clones that have been made, which are basically Twitter but for right-wingers. Is there a P? Parler. That's what I'm trying to think. Gab. Thank you, everybody. It's not great when the Wikipedia link for your social media platform comes up higher than your actual thing. Parler. Real people. Unfiltered voices. True freedom. One day I'll do something about political obsessions with the notion of real people. The real people are out there. The real people who have opinions about, who is a real person, who is not a real person. But when platforms like Parler, platforms like Gab, platforms like Truth Social first launched, the whole thing seemed kind of weird, right? Because the whole point of like a Twitter, for example, was that kind of anyone could get stuck into the conversation. And so if you're on the left or you're on the right, not only do you get to kind of see the opinions of people on the other side, you also get to kind of like have a bit of a tete-a-tete, and you get to kind of try and convince people that you are correct and that they are incorrect. And therefore you get to kind of shape politics, right? And sites like Parler, Gab, Truth Social seemed silly because they kind of missed that a little bit, right? If all Trump supporters are on Truth Social, well then how do they influence the public sphere, right? Because they're not there to be chatting with people. And they sort of got mocked for this a little bit. And in fact, there's a great Dan Olsen video, which I think is brilliant. It's, to my mind, is like one of the best things he's ever made. And I guess that's because I don't know, this is sort of a zone that interests me in particular. It's called VidMe, or Why Platforms Aren't Your Friends. And it's all about the ways in which, I've mentioned this on stream a bunch of times, mentioned some videos, I'm sure. It's all about the ways in which, so VidMe launched as a YouTube competitor, and basically the only people that could exist within, the only people who would upload to VidMe initially were people who had been banned from YouTube or whose content wasn't allowed on YouTube. And so therefore you end up with a site that is just like either just sort of like right-wing stuff, or it's like with some platforms you end up with just kind of effectively soft pornography. Yeah, Serial Chick says that most of them were thrown off for a reason. And I think this is still very much the case with like YouTube, for example, right? For long-form horizontal TV-esque stuff, YouTube still wins out, right? Vimeo has basically had to do a different thing and become a kind of video hosting service rather than a public platform which people can discover stuff, because YouTube just kind of owns that as a, like, if you want to find stuff to watch, you are going to go to YouTube. If you are someone who wants to create long form horizontal video, you are going to do it on YouTube. However, for social media websites as spaces to converse, it increasingly feels like that maybe isn't the case anymore. We saw a really big split with the launch of Blue Sky. Or maybe not the launch of Blue Sky, but the sort of popularization of Blue Sky around the US election, where a lot of people who felt like they didn't want to be supporting the business projects of Elon Musk left and went to Blue Sky. And Blue Sky as a platform often feels like a kind of centrist or liberal space in ways that I often find odd. Whenever I set my own Blue Sky up, I think I somehow manage to... It really thinks that I am like a sort of British liberal who's obsessed with the Brexit referendum still. And so my Blue Sky feed is largely people who are like, well, if Brexit hadn't happened, we'd all be fine, actually. And people who are like, even if they're not super into Keir Starmer, are like broadly Keir Starmer fans. And it's kind of, I don't know, I think I've set it up badly. But there's a very clear political divide and kind of like social divide between the people who are Blue Sky people now and the people who are Twitter people. And we also have the people who are Facebook people. We have the people who don't use Facebook because they only use TikTok. We have, your Parlors and your Truth Socials. And it feels like something has broken in the world of social media. And in some regards, it feels like, as someone who was always a critic of monopolistic social media platforms, it feels like maybe there should have been, part of me should be celebrating this, right? This video here,
let's talk about the meta,
has a whole section called Monopoly Men, where I talk about, Google Plus trying to make Google Plus happen, and they couldn't peel anyone away from Facebook. Where I talk about Amazon getting a monopoly over online retail in the US. I talk about Facebook becoming a monopolist over social media. Like, in some regards, maybe I should be happy about the fact that it no longer feels like there is a center of gravity to the world of social media. But I don't think what we've got is any better. Because whenever I dip into Blue Sky, I sort of feel like I am in this really weird world of, as I said, because I've set mine up badly, people who still think it's 2016 and the Brexit referendum is happening. And then I go over to Twitter and it's just like the wildest conspiracy theories. Like, for anyone that's not used Twitter X for some time, it is now just like constant conspiracy theory. Well, in the UK at least, constant conspiracy theories about Keir Starmer. I have many criticisms of Keir Starmer. These are just like often baseless conspiracy theories, and that stuff is just like mainstream on the platform. And then we have all this kind of like splintering of all of this in ways that I actually don't think is better. Because the problem with Facebook being a monopoly was not necessarily the fact that
was cut on sales too. The App Store brings in almost twice as much.
That was sales. For this chart again, the problem with Facebook being a monopoly was not like the fact that everyone was there. The fact that everyone was on Facebook was kind of useful and like broadly pro-social. Like, the idea that when I'm on social media, I should accidentally brush up with the views of someone who I might not actively seek out is maybe useful. Even if those views are not aligned with my own, even if I'm never going to come around to believing those things as well, it is kind of good for me to know what other people in my local community, but also in my like familial community, in my national community, like whatever it is, to know what views are hanging around. It is also good for, I don't know, if you've got an aunt or an uncle with some slightly conspiracist views, it is good for them if they are using social media to be doing so in a way in which they brush up with people, intentionally or otherwise, who are able to go like, actually aunt ... actually uncle ... I'm not sure that that's true. That meme you've just shared. Just no, I don't want to like ruin your day or whatever, but just to let you know, that's not true. That is good. That is broadly pro-social. That is good for a society and a community for all that stuff to happen. The problem with Facebook being a monopolist was the fact that Mark Zuckerberg got to control all of this, right? That we as users of that platform didn't have any control over how our data was used, how the platform shaped, like the ways in which the policies around what one could and couldn't post and who could and couldn't be on there were shaped. The problem wasn't the form it took as a technology. The problem was the governance of that technology. And the same is true of so many of these things. There is a reason that these monopolies establish, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Amazon, whether it's YouTube, and that is that we like convenience. And monopolies, one of the sort of on a level of like platform, monopoly is we sort of like it, right? A lot of us kind of liked it when Netflix was the go-to streaming service, right? It feels worse now that you have to have Amazon and Netflix and Now TV or HBO Max, depending on where you are, or you have to have these thousands of different streaming services. That is not a better scenario. It often feels as though the go-to solution to monopoly currently is that we need more competition, right? The monopoly itself is bad, that we need more competition. My feeling is that in a world of platform capitalism, or a world of techno-feudalism, or a world of whatever you want to call it, the reason these monopolies emerge is because it is actually really efficient. And it's really good to, I don't want a monopoly in terms of who is selling me stuff on a platform like Amazon. I don't want a monopoly on who is making videos or going on YouTube. I don't want a monopoly on who's making films that could go on like Netflix, because those things, that would be bad. We like the micro choices. The macro choice of where do we find this stuff, there's a really strong argument for monopoly there, in the same way that there's an argument for monopoly over roads or pipes or electricity cables, right? Spotify is a monopoly. And there's a lot about the way that monopoly works that we don't like, right? The platform gets enriched whilst artists don't. But being able to share playlists with one another is great. Having a go-to app that is well-designed, etc., we generally like that. A Draven of the Cloth saying it's not bad that these are unified platforms, it's just bad that they're managed by capitalist enterprise. Yeah. And so I've been thinking a lot recently about, what is the defenses of monopoly on a platform level? I always think back to when I eventually managed to convince my mum to switch her landline phone provider from BT, British Telecom, which had been the nationalised phone company until the 1980s, over to a different company because it was cheaper. And that took me till the 2010s. A strong 30 years after the telecoms industry in the UK had been privatised and the government had tried to make lots of competition happen within it. And all of this competition is so much of it exists on the same cables underneath that a lot of the competition is around effectively what branding you have and what handset you have or what router you have, etc. But effectively, Paul saying my mum refuses to switch from British Gas even now, for her, choosing your telephone provider was kind of a nonsense like hassle. Like, why is her life made better by having the choice over who provides her like the service is going to be the same. Like, brilliant what progress that we have, that this is now a thing that she has to do. One of the things that came up, so I made a video last year, 2023, about energy privatization in the UK, and
metaphorically, of course.
When it came to the privatization of the supply industry, which is the name that's often given to the bit of the electricity and gas sectors where, like, someone signs you up and says, hi, I'm now your energy provider, I'm British Gas, or I'm whatever, like, the kind of end part of the industry that you interface with, people were, like, really stubborn about not really caring about swapping their energy provider. And, like, for decades, the government had to try really hard to get people enthused about the idea that every year or every 6 months or every 2 years, when, like, your contract with your energy supplier ended, that you would go to compare the market or something and try and find the new best energy provider that you wanted to be with, because no one gave a shit, because the electricity that comes through is the same. And the prices, like, sometimes were a bit different, but not huge amounts. And, like, if you're sort of an economics professor who wants to find equilibrium prices or whatever, then in theory you love the idea, you know, you think that people should love the idea of going out and finding the best price for their electricity. And if you're a politician, you think this is good for the industry, etc., because competition drives down prices or whatever. If you are a normal person, having to go and, like, find the best price for electricity every year is a hassle which you don't like. There's a real you know, the Microsoft thing where, like, people don't have the meme about, is this going to send me to it? The Microsoft, yeah, how likely are you to recommend Windows 10 to a friend or colleague? Please explain why you gave this score. I need you to understand that people don't have conversations where they randomly recommend operating systems to one another. Like, there's a real thing of policymakers and economists being like, yeah, people will love getting to choose who their energy provider is, and, like, everyone else in society being like, no, just please make the lights turn on. Like, that's all I want. Like, I want the lights to turn on, and I want to pay, like, a fair price for that. Like, that's all. And it really feels like the government could just sort that. Like, we could have one, we could just sort of have, like, one person that goes to whoever is generating the electricity, because ideally all of the cables are just publicly owned, because that's the thing that makes sense, because it's public infrastructure. And we could have, like, one person that just goes like, hey, you're generating electricity at this power plant, we're gonna pay you this for it, this is what we want to pay for it, does that kind of cover your costs? Brilliant, done. Instead, we get a ludicrous system where everyone has to, like, go and pay for their thing. Like, everyone hates renegotiating their internet contract at the end every 18 months or so. Like what is that? No one wants to be doing that. Like, there's a really strong argument for socialism in just that, or, like, social democracy, just in the sense of, like, imagine how much less admin there would be. Because, like, I think we like the micro choices. We like getting to decide what appliances we have that we can plug into the electricity. Very few people are brand loyal to an energy provider or a telecoms provider. The other one one thing that always comes up in the UK is politicians are obsessed with introducing choice into the NHS. Choice is one of the 6 components of the comprehensive model of personalised care. And the way in which politicians like to introduce the concept of choice into the NHS is to be like, well, actually, you should get to choose what hospital you go to have each thing, or you should be able to, you shouldn't have to go to the doctor's surgery that's right next to you. You should be able to go to a doctor's surgery that's really far away, because then competition will make things better or whatever. Where in actual fact, people really care about the micro choices, right? They want to not just be told by the doctor that they're getting a particular medication. They want to be able to have a discussion with their doctor and be like, what's best for you? What's going to have different benefits and different drawbacks. In some cases, people might go, I don't want treatment for this particular thing. I would rather have a shorter life where I live out this thing, or I'd rather live with this certain thing because I think my quality of life will be better rather than having to go through a bunch of treatment. Like all of the micro choices of how that, when people have babies, they want to get to decide like whether they have the music on, and they want to decide. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to have a cesarean, whatever. Like I don't know. Like people like to have the micro choices about their healthcare. The extent to which people are like, yes, I want to be able to go to a hospital that's very far away, is probably much more limited, unless you have a political environment which is really pushing this as a thing that you should want. In reality, I'd just like to know that all of the hospitals are broadly good, and that we can kind of sort out, like we can just make sure that they're all good, rather than be like, that one over there's sort of shit and hopefully competition will sort it out. But anyway, we start with social media. Because I actually think that in this breaking down of social media, kind of away from that monopolistic model and towards this, like, there's a blue sky and there is this and there's a Twitter and this word, like, we've actually lost something. There is more competition between social media platforms, but like, there was something really good we could have done there, A Facebook which was like managed in ways which was democratic and in which people could interface with one another, but also that we could have had a input into shaping like what the policies were and what happened to our data and where the money went. That could have been a really good and beautiful thing. Like a Wikipedia, right? It is broadly good that there is one Wikipedia, and that every so often someone tries to set up like a Conservapedia or whatever, and it's dreadful because Wikipedia is the one, right? It is the main. And part of what makes it so hardy, so sticky in terms of like not going away, and part of what makes it work so well is that it has that model where it is run by the people who maintain it, in a way that works really well. And people disagree about what gets put on it. People think some pages are better than others. But it's very clear how you can participate in changing that if you would like to. But the fact it's a monopoly is kind of good. And so it's been really weird to think about that. In listening to this book earlier today and kind of realizing maybe some of the things that have changed, that the monopoly on social media seems to have faded quite a lot. And yet I think we might be in a worse place for it. And I wonder how that might affect how we could and should look at the management of other platforms, right? Something like a YouTube. Is there a better world where there is a right-wing YouTube and a left-wing YouTube? No, I don't think that's a particularly great place to be. Would it be in competition? Yes. Am I more worried about the governing of the thing than the fact that it is a monopoly? Not Mehdi saying so it's not the concept of the monopoly that is a problem, but who's running the monopoly. Absolutely. Absolutely, right? We love Wikipedia because they found a model which is participatory and which is not for profit and which is, has public good at the heart of it. I mean, what's interesting about Wikipedia is that it's not a government regulating it. It's actually got this whole like very robust system which exists around it as well. It's so robust that it's like it would be difficult for a kind of group with a like partisan interest in changing it to take it over and do something different with it, because it has such a rich kind of community that is not only involved in making the thing happen, but also like running the direction of the organization. For a time, I really wanted to make a video about Wikipedia and about like Wikipedia as a model for like another internet, and whether the moment of possibility for that has passed, and whether it hasn't. Because a lot of the founders of Wikipedia are also kind of odd. I think one of them is like a right-wing guy, right? I mean, Jimmy Wales is like a super libertarian guy. I'm fairly sure I'm right in saying that he's got some slightly objectionable views. Let me have a look at his. Yeah, he's an objectivist who loves Ayn Rand. What's interesting though is that to some extent he must at least accept the direction that Wikipedia goes in when other people are chipping in, which is interesting as well. But so I do like wonder where this goes. I mean, to some extent, a lot of the monopoly elements of the internet have also like moved beneath it. Thank you so much for watching this clip from one of my Monday night live shows. If you'd like to find out how to join me for those live shows over on Twitch, then you can find out a little bit more information about how to do so down below. And if you'd like to watch more of these clips, ad and sponsor free, then you can do so over on Nebula, my premium streaming service that I've been working on with a bunch of other indie creators that I'm sure you know and love for the past bunch of years now. Nebula is the premium streaming service of all good education and education adjacent creators. Over there you can watch all of our usual videos, ad and sponsor free, as well as a growing catalogue of exclusive content, such as my debut feature-length documentary, Boomers, which has been out for coming on for 5 or 6 months now, but in which I take a look at the lives and legacy of the baby boomer generation through a road trip across the US, Europe, and the UK. You can also watch over there my Nebula exclusive class, How to Research Like a PhD Student, which I take you through all of the skills which I use to put together these videos, both here on the Clips channel and also over on the main channel, how I kind of absorb lots of research and all that stuff. And we also have a bunch of other stuff, such as Bobby Broccoli's new documentary, 17 Pages, and a bunch of other narrative films and shows too. If you'd like to join Nebula and get access to all of that beautiful exclusive stuff, then you can do so using my personal link, go.nebula.tv/Tom Nicholas, and that'll get you 40% off an annual plan for doing so. That brings the cost to about $3 a month, which is still by far the cheapest streaming service you'll even be able to find to sign up to for some absolutely excellent stuff and to support the work of some really well-meaning and enthusiastic creators such as myself. That link again is go.nebula.tv/Tom Nicholas. Thanks for watching once again, and I'll see you over on Nebula.